Money Sense, bringing an informed financial perspective to the Cayman community.
Very good morning to our listeners and warm welcome to Money Sense. This morning I'm your host, Erik, and I'm delighted to be joined this morning by Jacob MacAdam. I'm the CEO of Ascendant Re, a Cayman B3 licensed reinsurance company focused on reinsuring American annuity policies. And I'm the CIRCA Membership Committee Chair. CIRCA is the Cayman International Reinsurance Companies Association. Jacob MacAdam is a partner in the corporate finance, private equity, reinsurance, and regulatory practice groups at Appleby, a premier legal firm in Cayman. Jacob, give us a little background and a little bit about the practice work at Appleby.
Sure, Erik. Morning, everybody. Thanks for having me, first and foremost. It's great to be here. And thanks for the introduction. Yes, I'm a partner at Appleby, based here in Cayman. I am the co-head of our reinsurance team, and I've been practicing here in Cayman for nearly 15 years. So prior to arriving here with my young family, I was a corporate finance lawyer in London with a large US law firm called Gibson, Dunn & Crutcher. In terms of what we do in the reinsurance space here, we effectively advise on the full life cycle of a reinsurer. So we help folks come here, get set up, and we maintain them. So whether they are looking to enter into a reinsurance treaty, do a financing, make an acquisition, we're full service. We have corporate lawyers, finance lawyers, regulatory lawyers, and heaven forbid, if our clients ever need it, we have litigators. So we are here to help in any way that we can for our reinsurance clients.
I appreciate that. Well, it's a pleasure to have you on the show, Jacob, and it's been great to work with you on a recent reinsurance transaction, so I can vouch for that expertise. I look forward to discussing the growing reinsurance market here in Cayman with you. Premier Andre Ebanks, as people are aware, has placed a significant focus on a new phase of financial sector growth, placing reinsurance at the forefront of that, along with regulatory modernization and a heavy focus on attracting global life, annuity, and property and casualty business. Alongside the premier support, we also have support from Cayman Finance and the regulatory bodies here in Cayman. This government support comes on the back of remarkable growth in the reinsurance industry, as you're aware. We've seen total assets surge from $23 billion in 2020 to $101 billion in 2025, representing a fourfold increase. Cayman now represents approximately 10% of the total U.S. offshore life reinsurance market. And for context, the U.S. life reinsurance market today is valued at approximately $1.5 trillion. So a very significant market. Jacob, just for the benefit of our listeners, can you just describe a little bit what reinsurance is and what role it plays?
Sure. I think exactly as you said, Erik, it's certainly a hot topic at the moment. I think before we dive into what reinsurance is, I think it's really important to understand that reinsurance is nothing new for this jurisdiction.
Right.
Reinsurance has been here 20 plus years. Take a trip down to Cayman Bay, you'll see a number of very, very established reinsurers with their nameplates up on buildings, the likes of Greenlight, Knighthead, etc. So whilst it's nothing new, we are undoubtedly seeing significant growth, which is born from the stats that you were just mentioning. So what is reinsurance? Well, in its simplest guise, it's effectively insurance companies purchasing insurance from a reinsurer.
Right.
So stripping all this back, and as you and I know, there's a lot of terminology in reinsurance.
But
stripping all that back, let's strip it back. So you have a US writer of insurance, and it's writing multiple hundreds, thousands of policies a month, a year. So it's off the back of writing those policies, it's taking on board a whole load of risk.
Right.
So what it's looking to do is effectively spread that risk. So reduce that risk by buying insurance from a reinsurance firm, and the reinsurance firm effectively agrees to cover some of those losses should the losses materialize.
It's the same concept for the policyholder. They're trying to reduce their risk, while the insurance company's trying to say, well, we're now onboarding this risk. We also don't want to hold all the risk on our own balance sheet, so let's find someone else to work with. We can spread the risk.
Exactly right, and it's there to protect policyholders. I think that's
right.
a really important point to establish. You know, the benefit of reinsurance, and there are lots of benefits, and I'm sure we're going to discuss them during the course of this morning.
Right.
But one of them is to make sure that policyholders are protected.
Right.
And within that very simple analogy, there are different types of reinsurance. There's lots of bells and whistles that can be added. But for example, there can be proportional reinsurance, where effectively the reinsurer receives a percentage of the premiums and pays the same percentage of the losses. So that's one example. Right. Another would be excess of loss reinsurance, where the insurer pays up to a certain amount of the losses, and after that, the reinsurer covers the additional points. So there's lots of different structures that can be adopted within this kind of bigger banner of reinsurance.
Thanks, Jacob. I think that sets it up pretty well. We kind of discussed the fact that reinsurers are generally taking risk off another insurer's balance sheet, which allows them to operate a little bit. And so can you give us a little bit more examples or uses of the reinsurer by other insurance companies and why they would want to buy reinsurance?
Yeah, sure. I think that there's a number of growing reasons, frankly. One of them that we touched on was effectively to protect the downside. Right. So, in the event of a catastrophic event, for example, you want to protect the downside against large losses. That's one. It also frees up the balance sheet for an insurer to go off and sell more insurance policies, right? If it's offloaded some of the risk, again, to an appropriately regulated and capitalized reinsurer.
So one way I like to think about it is it's kind of like a bank. So when a bank issues loans and stuff like that, they have to maintain a certain level of capital. Mm-hmm. So they have a capital requirement. That's no different for the insurer. The insurer, he's writing premiums, and that's great. He's making margin. He's collecting some fees. But at the end of the day, he's retaining the risk and has capital to back it up. Unless he can constantly grow his capital base, he can't keep writing. That's exactly the only avenue for them to continue to write, because that's actually their primary function, is to gain those kind of writing fees, is to look for reinsurance, because now they can offload that risk and they can continue writing. And the reinsurer, that's the game they're playing. They want to go on the capital side. They're not exactly directly writing.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So it may be to avail himself of meeting certain capital requirements, their statutory obligations, to improve balance sheet efficiency, or to free up capital to perhaps return capital to shareholders in the form of a dividend. So lots of different multiple ways and reasons and drivers behind the growth of why insurers are increasingly looking to use reinsurance. And when we set reinsurers up, reinsurers are also reinsuring their risk as well. So the chain continues, again, always to appropriately capitalized and regulated entities.
Yeah, it's quite a financial playground in there once you start seeing how they're operating. Exactly. And they're all specifying very specific risk parameters they want to operate around and predictability around cash flows.
Exactly.
So it's a very interesting field in finance. Reinsurance has actually become pretty critical to the global economy. Can you give us a little bit of context on how it's developed and what that is?
Yeah, sure. I think we've touched on some of it already. It is undoubtedly a significant tool within the war chest of the financial economy now. I mean, it's effectively spreading the risk across multiple appropriately capitalized and regulated entities. Really, as I mentioned earlier, the ultimate goal of all of this is to protect Joe Blow, who buys the insurance policy, to make sure that in the event they call in the insurance policy, it's serviced adequately.
Right, and so the policies we reinsure are annuity policies, and in this day, volatility and kind of predictability is becoming very scarce. The annuity market, it continues to grow, and it attracts that capital for people in their retirement age who no longer have the potential to earn significant income. They need to protect and they need to guarantee. So the annuity product now is becoming a big staple in kind of a retiree's portfolio of assets. So I see that it'll continue to grow. And to our earlier point, the policyholder is ultimately who we're trying to protect, because we want to make sure they're made whole. Yeah, and that's how this all comes together.
And that growth is being driven through the US and also Asia as well.
Right. Yeah. Right. It makes a lot of economic sense. We've talked about kind of releasing balance sheet kind of risk and exposure. But is there another kind of reason why there's a growing use of reinsurance?
Well, some of our listeners may have heard of the terminology asset-intensive reinsurance.
Right.
It's been around for quite some time. Effectively, this is where the reinsurer is laser-focused on effectively managing the assets that back the liabilities that the reinsurer assumes from the insurer. So you'll have the investment teams that sit within the reinsurer or work for them that are effectively looking to match the risk profile of the assets with the liabilities.
Right.
And really what the reinsurer is looking to do there is effectively generate a return on the assets that exceed the cost of the liabilities and the cost of capital.
Right.
So you can see there the interplay between the different skill sets that are required to work within a reinsurer to deliver the results that are required. We talked about the growth of annuity policies out of Asia and out of the US and the UK and Europe as well, but predominantly what we're seeing, 90% of the risk that's reinsured through Cayman is US facing.
Right.
So that's a lot of what goes through this jurisdiction. And I think a fundamental driver to all of this in terms of this growth is the hookup and the tie-up between private equity and reinsurance.
Right.
So private equity folks who are they very much fit that mold of being laser focused on managing the assets. There's a convergence between asset management, private equity, and reinsurance.
100%. And what's really interesting for the asset managers is now with the annuity product, rather than a bank deposit's on demand. So if you want to go and take your money out tomorrow or next week, or there's a whole bunch of people looking for liquidity from the bank has to maintain assets that are very highly liquid to easily convert those into kind of making those depositors whole when they want their cash.
Yeah.
Whereas the annuity policies, what's beautiful for that, and then private equity and the asset managers have really latched onto, is they get to use money for 3, 5, and 10 years, which really allows them to plan, and they can put infrastructure into place, and they can really use capital for not just 12 months or 6 months, because that's very, that's not a very stable basic cash flow.
Yeah.
It's inefficient. So now you can group together a whole bunch of people's capital, know that you have it for 5 or 10 years. You can really do something productive with it. So I think the transformation there is really incredible.
Well, I think that's right, and I undoubtedly will come to this in our as our discussions continue. But private equity is very, very familiar with this jurisdiction, right? They've been structuring their funds through Cayman.
Yeah.
With the world-class funds offering that this jurisdiction has to offer. So when they're looking to set up an offshore reinsurer, very, very comfortable with Cayman, very, very comfortable with what the offering is here, and therefore they naturally gravitate towards this jurisdiction to structure their reinsurance vehicles.
Makes a lot of sense. They already know it.
Exactly.
So they can continue on the financial food chain and start developing reinsurance here as well.
Exactly.
Well, I'd like to talk about QJS status. We're going to start moving to, but I think we have a break upcoming. So I'll take a pause here, and when we come back, we'll start talking about some of the regulatory kind of advancements that are taking place here in Cayman on the reinsurance side.
Radio Cayman, maintaining the innovation.
On a daily basis, making it easy to connect with you, our listeners. Add us to WhatsApp today, 925-3261. That's 925-3261.
Radio Cayman.
Send a text or voice note.
Message us at 925-3261 on WhatsApp today and get active with Radio Cayman.
Radio Cayman, the voice of the Cayman Islands.
Radio Cayman, maintaining the innovation.
This is
Money Sense, bringing an informed financial perspective to the Cayman community. Brought to you by the CFA Society Cayman Islands.
And now, more Money Sense.
All right. Welcome back to Money Sense. I'm your host, Erik. I'll continue talking to Jacob MacAdam here about reinsurance here this morning. I left off and I wanted to talk about the regulatory advancements taking place, and that's there's lots of acronyms in this kind of world, as we know, but Cayman is seeking to receive qualified jurisdiction status, QJS. Can you give us a little bit of context on what that could mean for Cayman, and why the move to try to obtain that status?
Yeah, sure. I think we're quite early days in that journey, in that process. But effectively, what qualified jurisdiction status is, in the context of the NAIC, the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, is basically a designation by the U.S. state insurance regulators to indicate that another country, in our case Cayman, that their insurance regulatory system is basically considered sufficiently strong and robust and reliable. So what that means is by having QJ status, Cayman would be announcing to the market that the rules and regulations governing Cayman reinsurance are comparably robust to those outside or to those in the US. So it's effectively the US, acknowledging and saying, we effectively trust insurance supervision.
Big stamp of approval
in Cayman. Exactly. Yeah.
On that point, I mean, it is quite an exclusive club that has that qualification. There's just currently 7.
That's right.
So this is not a small undertaking to take. That said, what's at play? Is this if QJS doesn't quite fit us, maybe we realize as we kind of move down the path, we actually think locking us in this kind of environment may not be the best for Cayman, or maybe it is the best. But I guess my ultimate question here is just, is it a make or break for Cayman if QJS takes place?
I don't see it as a make or break. As I mentioned, it's very much it's in its infancy. I mean, the Premier is committed to it. I think that Cayman Inc. is committed to going down this route, but we are in the early stages of it. I think if the jurisdiction were to get it, it would be another feather to our cap, so to speak.
Right.
But I think the fundamentals of what makes this a great jurisdiction for reinsurance, those fundamentals are there. They're not going anywhere. This would be an additional win, basically.
Right. I mean, we've seen the growth, like we've talked about, the private equity and the companies backing these reinsurers in Cayman are comfortable here.
Yeah.
I do think it plays a little bit more. We haven't really talked about the two sides of the reinsurance kind of spectrum, if you will, but
P&C and the life side. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm focused on the life side. That's my business. Obviously, there's a huge business for property and casualty, which is kind of more event-driven reinsurance. Just more simply, I think the life and annuity will continue. It will be nice to have that stamp of approval. Maybe some kind of smaller windfall. I think the bigger windfall would be on that other side of the business, which is the property and casualty reinsurance side of it.
Yeah.
We've talked about reinsurance. I'm really excited to see this kind of develop in our own backyard here in Cayman. I think it is quite an exciting time. As you said, it's nothing new. However, there's just the growth and now the interest to kind of Cayman just really fit to kind of continuing to grow this industry here. What does this mean for Caymanians and locals here? Like why is this important here for Cayman?
I think it's really fundamental, actually. I think that this is not just a bunch of financial engineering. This is actually going to mean the introduction of what I see as an additional pillar to the already very, very strong financial services community here. So there's a lot of initiatives going on currently to get young people, Caymanians, into this reinsurance space and educate them about it. Because, as you and I mentioned, there's lots of terminology. Yeah. It's quite complex. But actually, when you strip it all back, the fundamentals are very sound there in terms of what the business premise is here. I mean, only last week there was an event arranged by Circa, who you mentioned, and Cayman Finance, called the Next Generation series of seminars, and that was really well attended. There were 130 attendees, young folks wanting to learn about reinsurance and potential jobs for them. Well, reinsurance, as we know, it involves lots of number crunching, actuarial skills, accounting skills. That's all great. But there's also great opportunities for other skill sets within the jurisdiction. So, PR, marketing, IT, human resources, just to name a few. So as reinsurance grows here, the ecosystem around it will grow. Right. And the opportunity for jobs and development for the local community, I believe, will be significant. It already is. Yeah. Touching on actuaries, I don't have the stats to hand, but 5 years ago, I doubt there were more than 15 or 20 actuaries on the island. Yep. Now there's close to 100. So that's a really promising barometer of the growth of this space.
And actuaries are very, it's a very great career to get involved in. I mean, it's stable, high paying, high skilled.
Exactly.
Technically, you know, you need to be very proficient.
Yes. No, that's exactly right. So, you know, exactly that. But it's not all just numbers and figures. There are great opportunities for lots of different skill sets within this really exciting and growing industry.
Yeah, I love the fund industry here. Obviously, it's created, you know, incredible opportunities for those that are here. The reinsurance industry is very interesting to me in that there's more peripheral needs to a reinsurer. There's more bodies and boots on the ground for a reinsurance typically than a fund. A fund can be a little bit, it, you know, has a stamp in the ground here and has some service providers, but generally most of the kind of ops, if you will, the trading, the kind of most of that work is not as often done in Cayman, where the reinsurer, when they set up, they bring more bodies typically.
Certainly for the Class Ds, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, we're really fortunate with this. You know, the gold standard fund industry that's here already, the market leading fund industry. And reinsurance can complement that because the skill sets and the service providers that are required to work within the reinsurance space, there's a lot of crossover. That's right. With the funds industry and the banking industry as well. So it's kind of a cross pollination between those three different sectors, I would say.
Right. I know Circa, I'm involved with Circa, as I mentioned, and they kind of have an initiative for Rising Stars. And I think that's an interesting initiative to start kind of getting kind of the spotlight out there and showing what young Caymanians are doing and how they're helping getting involved in a new industry.
I think it's huge. I mean, we have a young lady at our firm who we sponsored through law school. And she's been with the firm the entirety of her career, absolutely flying.
Amazing.
And you know, she was acknowledged as a rising star within the reinsurance space. We worked very closely together. We worked on some matters with you, and yeah, it's just great to see, you know, young, smart people getting opportunities at a very early stage in their career and getting recognized so quickly. So it's great.
Yeah, and in an industry like this, the thing is, opportunities are still pretty open. It's not a very consolidated market yet here in Cayman. It's still kind of growing in flux, and they're trying to figure it out, which means that those that really are kind of ambitious and want to go and take the reins on something, they can really drive forward with it.
You can be a first mover.
You can be a first mover here, you know, which is exciting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that really shapes it up around why, you know, reinsurance is pretty exciting for the jurisdiction. But what really makes Cayman exciting for reinsurers to come to and set up versus the other possible, you know, jurisdictions out there?
I think what you got to remember is there's competition between all the different different jurisdictions. What we are seeing is there's two buckets, if you will. So for new entrants into the space, particularly if it's private equity focused, they're really familiar with the jurisdiction, touched on that already. For others who are already more mature, they're already reinsurers in other jurisdictions, they're not looking to leave those jurisdictions. They're looking to set up in Cayman as a complementary jurisdiction. And then they will run their treaties, their transactions through whichever jurisdiction works best for them, but most importantly, which works best for the cedents that they're transacting with. I mean, we are so fortunate in this jurisdiction to have you know, the apparatus that's at our disposal. So a prudent and risk-based regulation with extremely strong oversight by SEMA. We have, as I touched on, the already excellent infrastructure afforded from the banking and the fund space. It shouldn't be overlooked in these interesting times we live in about the political certainty and stability that we have here. It's a really important point that I think we probably almost take for granted living in this fantastic island. We have the strong legal environment with the ultimate recourse to the UK courts. So clients looking to set up and transact in this business, in this space, take real comfort from that as a British overseas territory.
There's not a lot of unknowns for them setting up.
That's right.
They can kind of go through their risk kind of bucket checklist and kind of go through what would make them feel uncomfortable. And they can kind of realize rather quickly that, you know, this is a sound place to be operating.
Exactly. And the proximity to the US. As I mentioned, 90% of the risk is US facing. So that is really, really important. And you have the roster of service providers here already. So you have the accountants. Increasingly, the actuarial presence is growing. You have the insurance managers, which are vital for this space and play a significant role. And let's not forget the lawyers as well. So we have those guys.
Always important. Well, Jacob, I think that's really, really helpful. I've really enjoyed speaking with you here this morning. So, I appreciate you taking time as an expert in the space to kind of share your wisdom here on Radio Cayman and Money Sense, and kind of discuss why this is an important and growing area for Cayman. If you have any closing words, that would be great, Jacob.
No, just to thank you, Eric. It's always great to catch up with you. I really appreciate the opportunity. It is a really exciting space. It's an area of growth, of dramatic growth for this jurisdiction. So it's one to watch, and it's one that we can all benefit from. And great being here this morning, and thanks so much.
All right. Well, just finally, a quick reminder that our shows can be found on YouTube. You can type Money Sense Cayman. And if you have some topics you'd like to discuss in the future, please email us at moneysense@cfacayman.ky. With all that said, thank you for tuning in, and I encourage you to rejoin us in 2 weeks' time.